Ted was traveling to his grandparents' home in Missouri this summer vacation. It had been about 4 years since Ted had last visited Grandpa Gordon, especially after he moved to California for college. He barely had time to call any of his other family members, not that he wanted to anyway. But Grandpa Gordon was someone who Ted was really close to. Almost every year of his childhood, he visited him. Grandpa Gordon was rough and tough on the outside, but sweet and soft on the inside. All the other kids used to avoid him. But Ted would be by his side, helping him carry his duffel bag on their way to the forest to hunt. And that's exactly what Ted had planned for this summer as well. He would chill with Old Man Gordon, hunt down some deer, and make Grandma cook it up real nice on the backyard grill. Awesome. The flight was about 4 hours long, but as soon as Ted was off the plane, he was ready to adventure. However, Grandpa Gordon wasn't too up for the hunt anymore. He laughed, patting Ted on the back. Hunting? Oh, Teddy boy, you'll be amazed how fast men grow old. Isn't it too late to be out there? How about tomorrow morning? It seemed that Ted had to wait. Though the wait wasn't too bad because Grandma Janet was ready with a fridge full of Ted's favorite pies, pastries, cakes, and more. One more bite, teddy bear, just one. Grandma, I'm going to puke. Just one more, it's your favorite. Or not. The next morning, Grandpa Gordon was ready with all his traps and hunting gear, and so was Ted, bright and early. Grandpa Gordon's cabin was right in the middle of the Mark Twain National Forest, and the backyard was rather as far as you could go into the surrounding woods. The two headed out to the nearby lake where they spent much of the day, but they were only able to catch 2 birds by the time Grandpa Gordon was exhausted. Grandpa, this was so much more fun when I was younger, and you didn't even let me touch anything back then. Let's just say, when we were younger, Teddy boy. Now come on, let's pack up. Your grandmother's making special chicken pot pie tonight. Why don't you get going then? I'll stick around a bit more. I might even bring home a catch on my shoulders. Grandpa Gordon laughed. You even use my catchphrases now? Alright, but keep in mind, the whole of the Northern Territory is off limits. The area has been restricted, so keep to whatever's on this side of the lake. Restricted? What happened? We used to roam this whole place before. Look for yourself. It's been almost 2 years. There was a wildfire here, burned down the forest to coal. The Forest Patrol put out signs saying no one is allowed till the area returns to its natural condition. Alright, Grandpa, don't worry about me. Be home before supper, Grandpa Gordon called out from the path. Ted started roaming around the area when he noticed something move in the distance. He quickly ducked under a bush and tried to spot the motion. For a second, he thought he saw an animal hurry off into the trees. Ted wasted no time in running after it. But soon enough, he got exhausted and the animal was nowhere to be seen. Ted sat down under a tree and caught his breath before walking again. It was about 10 minutes later when he turned to get back to the bank that he realized the lake wasn't even in sight anymore. Ted was lost. But no reason to panic. Ted had his phone. He could easily navigate through here or call for help. Or maybe not. Shoot, no network. Ted took a look at his watch, his now only savior. He tried to navigate following the compass on it. It was nearly 6 and the skies were getting dark. Ted didn't bring a flashlight with him, so he'd better hurry back. Moments into walking, Ted spotted a house in the distance. Yes, he shouted out in joy, running towards it. Maybe he could get directions back home, or at least to the nearest highway. Or maybe the owner even knew his Grandpa Gordon. Ted couldn't be so far from home anyway. The house was small, but the garden was beautifully decorated. There was a pile of chopped up wood to the side, and if Ted wasn't mistaken, he thought he even smelled something cooking. Ted went up to the door and knocked. There was no reply. He knocked again. But no one was answering the door. Ted was sure someone lived here. He walked around the cabin trying to peer through the windows. He could faintly make out the furniture neatly arranged inside. Suddenly, Ted heard something shuffle behind him. In the darkness, he could barely see, which made him a bit anxious. There were bears and wolves around here, and there was no way he was going to make it anywhere at this time. "Is anyone there?" Ted said, knocking on the windows. After calling out and waiting for about 20 minutes, Ted started to get a feeling he wasn't alone out here in the woods. Not because anyone was in the house, but because someone or something was around watching him. Ted nervously broke down the doorknob with his multi-tool and entered the house. He really didn't have a choice at the moment, and he had no wishes to become a chew toy to a bear. Ted slowly creaked open the door. "Is anyone home?" It was eerily quiet. Ted searched for the lights, but to no avail. He walked around the dark house, searching his pockets for his lighter. The first thing that stood out in the house were all the portraits that were hung up on the walls. There were portraits of a woman, a man, and most likely their 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children. There was something about the portraits that were quite odd. The people were all posed so strangely, not a smile on their face or a twinkle in their eye. They were expressionless, as if they just simply stood there in front of the camera. Ted put down his bag and sat down on the armchair. There was nothing he could do until morning, so he might as well get some rest. Except an hour into the night, Ted was unable to sleep. There was something that was bothering him. He couldn't stop staring at the portraits. It seemed like the pictures were staring back at him. It started to give him the creeps. Feeling nauseous after a point, Ted covered his face and went to sleep. Throughout the night, he shifted in his chair, feeling uncomfortable. A strange tapping noise rang in his head. Had it started raining outside? Ted woke up the next morning. He felt something crawling on his face. Startled, he woke up to a long line of ants crawling across the floor. Ted furrowed his brows and looked around. Where was he? He was laying on the floor of what seemed to be a burnt, broken-down house. Ted got up and brushed off the ashes from his clothes. He was absolutely bewildered by what he saw around him. This wasn't the house he entered last night. He tried to remember what happened, but all he could clearly remember were the portraits that kept him up for so long. And that's when it occurred to him. Ted anxiously looked around the cabin. Right in the places where he had seen all those portraits hung up on the wall were actually windows. Exactly 8 of them. If there were no portraits, then who or what were those people? Ted hurried out the house in fear. Not caring which way he was going, he ran. He ran until he met the highway and noticed a Forest Patrol Jeep driving down. The officer hurried to stop and came out saying, "You're Russell Gordon's grandson, aren't you? Theodore Gordon? Your grandfather has gone mad searching for you. Did you get lost?" Ted looked back into the woods panting. The officer gave him a bottle of water. "Come on, I'll drop you back home." It wasn't long before they reached Grandpa Gordon's house. Grandpa was worried sick, and Grandma had flooded a river crying. They both hugged Ted and took him inside as soon as he stepped off the Jeep. "Where were you? What happened?" "Grandpa, had it rained last night?" "No, not the least bit. Why?" "Then, who made those sounds?" "It was the strangest night of my life, Grandpa." Ted explained what he experienced the night before. "I don't know, but there's no explanation to what I saw." "Burnt down house? Perhaps you entered into the restricted area, but were there any families living there? There was, the officer said, taking out his phone. Take a look at this, Ted. Ted looked at the picture of a family on the officer's phone. He widened his eyes in horror, remembering each portrait he had seen the night before. This is them. These people, I saw them there. Who are they? The Brunson family. You see, the Forest Patrol hasn't actually put the restriction on the area because of environmental concerns. In the past 2 years since the wildfire, many people have complained about experiencing unusual paranormal things in the Northern Territory. This is why the association took the decision to restrict the area from the public. The Brunson family had a small house in that area. They were a couple and their children, and they had quite a few. It was truly tragic that they were unable to escape that night. Every member of the family had passed away in the fire. All that remained when the fire had been extinguished was the house that was burnt and damaged. People rumor that those helpless souls still live in their home. Their spirits are seen walking in the woods, guarding their property in the Northern Territory. Ted was overawed. Had he encountered the ghostly spirits of the dead? He had no explanation to what he experienced. But it was ever since then that he developed an unusual phobia to portraits and pictures. The only thing that flashed before his eyes when he saw one was the way each portrait was staring at him that night when he was lost in the middle of the woods in that burnt-down house. Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.